Poland chased the West, but was it all a fantasy? Before you continue with this video, I want you to take a second, stop it, and write down in the comment section what is your opinion. Boom! For most of Polish modern history, the West became almost like a dream to Poland. Because, you know what? The West represented freedom, represented wealth, represented stability, modernity, many things that particularly during Polish, communistic times were not as accessible if they existed at all. I understand this topic perfectly well because even though I did not grow up in communistic Poland, I grew up in a third world country, the Dominican Republic, and we also not only idealized, but we dreamt every day with the West. Even though, weirdly enough, we belong to the West. Ideologically speaking, politically speaking, but not economically speaking, not when it came to development. No, we were far behind. We actually share a lot more in common with Poland than we did with the States, especially the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. If you think about communistic times in Poland, where the grayness of it all, like the lack of color, the lack of smiles and development, the lack of goods, the lack of freedom, all of these things created an even bigger gap, a wider contrast. It actually felt enormous. If we look at ads or television shows or anything from the West, it all looked colorful. It looked plentiful. It looked rich. It just looked like the West.
It doesn't matter what comes, fresh goes better in life, with mentors fresh and full of life.
I don't know, especially America, for me, the United States of America, because America is the whole continent. My reality and what we looked up to was the United States. And throughout the years, I came to realize that for Poland, the US was also this unreachable, unattainable target. And it was the representation of everything that was good with the world. Let me be clear that I'm not saying in this video that everyone in Poland, all Poles, thought that America was the answer. But I think it's fair to say that a lot of Poles, especially back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, really thought that America was the place to be. When it comes to a movement, a cultural movement that affected and changed the world, I think the US was the head of the spear. So when communism collapsed in 1989, Poland went all in the pursuit to eventually being accepted as part of the West. What do we need to do as a country to belong to that elite group of countries? Capitalism replaced socialism, and Western companies and firms basically flooded the Polish market. English became the language that everyone wanted their children to speak. Russian used to be a very common second language in Poland. That became a thing of the past. It was English. It was the language of opportunities. It was what you needed to become successful. And of course, what to say about becoming part of NATO and part of the European Union? It was almost like a national priority. I hear these days there's a big growing sentiment in Poland of maybe not wanting to belong to the European Union, not wanting to be in the European Union. And let me tell you something, I want to make a video about this. I'm going to make a dedicated video where I'm going to talk about this. I can see the minuses, I can see the Vade, and I can see the Zalete, I can see the pluses. I gotta say that without the European Union, it would be very difficult to speak about Poland in the present form. And because of all of this, the cities grew rapidly. The salaries, the wages, they increase. Granted, not immediately, but let's not even compare a salary that someone is earning, making a living in a free capitalistic market compared to a communistic reality. And infrastructure, do we really have to talk about infrastructure in Poland? The change has been dramatic. And right around this time, and of course the subsequent years after this, brought millions of people into a new class now, the middle class. Here in Poland, it's like most people are middle class. In just a matter of some years, now all of a sudden you slowly had a new power class in Poland. Compared to the very early 90s, Poland these days is almost unrecognizable. But something interesting happened with all of this focus on the West and the Western ways. But along with this success, something else happened. And that's basically that Poland created an idealized version of the West. Everything there in the West was better. Everything. They had it all figured out. They solved all the problems. They had the cleanest streets. They had the safest streets. They had the biggest companies and corporations generating the most amount of money. They were all taking place in the West. And of course, Hollywood did not help. Hollywood played an incredible role in injecting this idealized version of the West onto all of these countries like Poland, like the Dominican Republic. MTV. Who here remembers MTV? I remember being in the 90s just watching MTV and just dreaming about one day being able to see the bands that were there. It's like the music sounded better. It sounded, I don't know, with more finesse. I didn't even use like merengue or bachata. Bachata that is so huge these days. It was like, yeah, but it's not alternative music. It's not Nirvana, and I'm sure that it was the same in Poland. When you have this idea of what you think something is like, and you've built it, and you've collected the little pieces of that puzzle that have been fed to you through television, pop culture, magazines, then it's not entirely true. There was this wrong assumption that once Poland finally catches up to the West, then life will be complete. Here we are in 2026, and I would argue with anyone if you don't admit that Poland is almost as complete as it can get when it comes to all of the different elements. And then what happened was that this allure of the West, this dream became so appealing that thousands and thousands of Poles fled the country. They moved to Britain, they moved to Germany, to the States, and then reality slowly hit. And you know what? I lived in the UK, I lived in London for almost 6 years, and I met a lot of Polish people there. So I met the community there. And I think many of them were really happy with their lives there. I think many of them for a long time got to live their dream of the West. They got to work, earning a lot better salaries, help their families that were here in Poland, send them money. Many of them built houses here in Poland that later on became retirement homes for them or for their families. After the infamous Brexit, many of those people that left, they did have their golden years there. We cannot now all of a sudden say that it was a mistake. And they went there and they saw that the West did not have all those dreams that they thought they had. It was all basically hell once they were there. I don't think that's the case. But they also saw something that doesn't get shown on television shows. They saw that maybe the West was not as safe as they thought, as organized as they thought. That image of a perfectly functioning Western society started to slowly crack. But I believe that one thing brought everything down to a way more level and clearer picture. Like my friend Phil says, the big equalizer, and that is the internet. The internet brought something that nobody was expecting. Now all of a sudden you have this unfiltered view of what is happening around the world. And of course, because the Western countries were the more advanced ones, the richer ones, they were the ones that gave their members of society the tools to first start showing their lives and showing things that surrounded them. So we start getting a more clear, unfiltered, unobstructed view of what was actually happening in those countries. How were people really, truly living? Don't get me wrong. I know American people that had a fantastic youth, almost like a Hollywood movie type of youth. The American dream. Many foreigners are there, or in England, or in Germany for that matter, France, and they are living the dream. But interestingly enough, the West at some point stopped being that point of reference. So Poland stopped trying to imitate the West. I do still think that Poland has a somewhat of a dysfunctional relationship with the West. I know Poland is proud of who it's become, But still, Poland looks at the West through the corner of the eye and tries to measure itself and still tries to get that thumbs up, that green light. I think that one of the things that I've encountered the most here is this almost unavoidable desire to criticize, especially America. Yet at the same time, I know a lot of Poles that the moment they step a foot in the US, they are mesmerized. The United States is a fantastic country. Forget about the politics, forget about all those things, the infrastructure, the terrain, the diversity. You know, it's really like you have many different mini countries inside of one. But I do feel that I have to mention that Polish relationship with West, with America, it's not entirely healthy. There's a little bit of the younger brother that eventually became maybe more successful, but the older brother, still he is cool. I think that Poland is trying to find how it can be cool, because I think Poland is really cool. It just needs to believe that it is itself cool. Poland is starting to get rid of its inferiority complex. Now, does it mean that the West is collapsing? I don't think so. Yeah, the West is running things slightly differently, and we have seen the holes, we have seen the downsides of many policies and decisions. I think the West is starting to recalculate things. And what is incredible even is that now they're looking at Poland. They're really looking at Poland as a model that, at least in the 21st century, in the year 2026, is working really well. I cannot even imagine how it must be for a Polish person to think, someone that was born in Poland in the 70s or in the 80s or 90s even, and to think that Poland is now being used as a measurement of success, especially by the older, historically more successful brothers. Let me know what's your take on this. I read all your comments. If you think I'm wrong, correct me. I don't mind. I think it opens the discussion for enriching ourselves. See you on another episode. Bye-bye.